Welcome to Live Like an Acrobat. I'm your host, Shenea Stiletto, two-time World Acrobatic Gymnastics Champion, USA Gymnastics Hall of Fame member, and Cirque artist. I'm also an advocate for rain. On each episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast, I discuss acro handstanding in terms of training tips, coaching, and I explore circus and acrobatic gymnastics competitive life as I have lived it from past to current, and I theorize on what the future may bring in these fields. On each episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast, I will bring you insight through my own experiences, which are rooted in a perspective built on social justice advocacy and how these important issues continue to intersect between the circus arts and acrobatics competitive world at large. On each episode, I have the pleasure of discussing these various narratives with a variety of fascinating special guests. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. Please consider a donation to encourage the continuation and evolution of this podcast. The details of how to donate are located in the show notes. Please make sure to check out the CircuspreneurBlog.com for extended conversations and interactive content of each episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. I am available for handstand private sessions and workshops through aerialfitbodies.com, and in a new announcement, I'm also a Circo certified trainer. Check out Circo.co, a new circus school online international platform where you can learn hand balancing with me and learn so many other circus disciplines from trained cirque performers from all over the world. On this episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast, I have the absolute honor of interviewing survivor and advocate Lisa Aneiva, founder of Dancing Is My Voice, an incredibly inspiring platform that supports sexual violence survivors. Founded by Lisa Aneiva, Dancing Is My Voice's mission is to provide forums where sexual violence survivors can find healing through connection to a supportive community, creative public expression, resources for hope and healing, and strength-building physical movements such as dance. Each year, they host an annual Zumbathon Charity Event during National Hispanic Heritage Month, mid-September to mid-October. This event attempts to gather enough people on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. to break the Guinness Book of World Records for largest Zumba class while raising awareness of sexual violence. I'm so honored and thrilled to participate as an expert offering pro tips to survivors of sexual violence for this year's Dancing Is My Voice event on October 10th, with the live Zumbathon hosted on October 11th. This is global, and I will be doing a discussion plus a Q&A. I'm also offering a giveaway of free attendance to attend my talk and discussion during the Dancing Is My Voice event. So please contact me through social media at Shenea Stiletto or on Instagram and Facebook at the Live Like an Acrobat podcast for access to the Dancing Is My Voices event. Lisa Aneiva founded Dancing Is My Voice after one of the deepest and darkest periods of her life, when she felt the most alone and ashamed. She determined that if it was up to her, others should never have to go through what she went through. She had been raped by someone in her church, and her husband and church blamed her for, quote-unquote, letting it happen. This was the third time she had been raped when she could remember who did it, where she was, and how old she was. She has other fragments of memories from childhood that she cannot piece together for a coherent story. For Lisa personally, the single most important factor in her healing has been dance in many forms, including worship, exercise, and performance. She has worked over 1,000 hours on the National Sexual Assault Hotline operated by RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, and she is a volunteer for the RAIN Speakers Bureau. Lisa is an NACP certified advocate with a designation of sexual assault intervention specialist. Her formal education includes an MBA from the George Washington University and a BS in Foreign Service from Georgetown University. Lisa's fitness certifications include PGA, Global Certified Personal Trainer status, AFAA Certified Group Fitness Instructor, and Red Cross certification in CPR, AED, First Aid, and Pediatric First Aid. Lisa is also licensed to teach many formats of Zumba. Please welcome Dancing is My Voice's founder, Lisa Aneiva, to the show. My conversation with the founder of Dancing is My Voice, Lisa Aneiva, was and is so inspiring for all of those out there advocating for survivors of sexual abuse, harassment, for survivors themselves, for those in the process of moving through a victimizing experience that maybe they've only come to acknowledge for themselves or that they have yet to share with others. There is no way that is right or wrong to be a survivor where you are in your story of healing. We're all in a state of becoming, and we're all in a state of healing on some level in all of its forms, as it is a very complex narrative to exist within. But Lisa shows us that that's okay. Lisa is so strong and powerful and has found her light and has found her way through many storms as a survivor and as an ally and as an advocate who has not only moved through her own pain and tendencies within her life or effects of her trauma that have manifested in all sorts of ways, as she shares in this episode. She has found the strength to help others through theirs, through dance, through movement, through speaking with victims on the National Assault Hotline, of which she has logged over 1,000 hours in her volunteership. Lisa is the practical resource that should be in the arsenal of any survivor or individual that's seeking to be an ally for those of us within the survivor community who need your help and who need assistance with our suffering and with our coping and with those that will acknowledge our pain. Dancing is My Voice is an amazingly celebratory event that I'm so honored to be a part of as an expert offering pro tips, as I have had an exhaustive journey as a survivor of sexual abuse, sexual assault, molestation, and rape, as a young acrobatic gymnast within USA Gymnastics, and as an adult within the circus arts world. And again, it's through those of us that have recovered, like Lisa, that make it possible for the rest of us to continue to expand our wings and to grow in our survivorship and our allyship and our ability to articulate our struggles and our stories and our paths to healing and our paths to support for others. And I gained a few inches after speaking with Lisa, as I have whenever I've had the pleasure of communicating with Lisa. And it really is a privilege to know her. And I think that what she offers is continued insight into how we can continue to push the conversation forward within the circus world around normalizing the conversation around abuse and assault, and within the USA Gymnastics community at large with hashtag Gymnast Alliance. These conversations are continuing to expand. They're continuing to be normalized. That is the goal, that anyone who has been victimized is able to reclaim their story, reclaim their life, reclaim their happiness, reclaim their peace in whatever form that comes in. And knowing that there are so many different paths to justice. Of course, I'm a very strong advocate of legal justice because I have been in so many environments all over the world where that is not an option for so many women, girls, boys, men who are victims of sexual violence. And so my fight and commitment to that, even though I always say I don't blame anyone for not reporting their story, for not going to the police with the way that I have been treated by the police. And the way that you'll hear that Lisa feels about the criminal justice system, I don't blame her one bit. And with respect to so many other survivors that I know, who also too found absolutely no help and no peace with going through the criminal justice system. But that also too inspires me to want to push for more change within that system, because I feel like we belong there. We belong there as advocating for better representation within the criminal justice system in however that may show up and however that may look, whether it's better advocacy, better lawyers, better laws, better sentencing, better guidelines, better systems of reporting, better systems of statement giving, better protections for victims. I've been through it all. I'm still going through it all. And I continue to feel very underwhelmed by it all. But as with what Lisa says, there are so many things to be hopeful about. And Lisa just gives me hope that you can continue on with your journey, that you can work through all of the darkest pains and moments and emotional tortures and outside pressures from society, and find your voice and move through your traumas with your body, with movement, to consistent recovery. And I am so lifted by Lisa, and I know that you'll be lifted by her as well. So please enjoy my conversation with Lisa Aneiva, the founder and creator of Dancing Is My Voice. Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. How are you?
Hi, Shenea. I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm thank you so much. And I'm so excited and honored to participate in the upcoming Dancing Is My Voice event as an expert offering pro tips for survivors.
We're so excited that you'll be speaking. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. This is such a special event for me, and I will be discussing different aspects of my journey as a survivor of sexual abuse, both in my acrobatic gymnastics competitive career and circus career. I discussed this with you prior, Lisa, that the conversation addressing sexual harassment and abuse has finally made its way into the circus world, and I recently participated in a panel discussion on Circus Talk that was very powerful, titled Abuse and Assault in Circus, Normalizing the Conversation. And I Thank you. And I never thought that these conversations would happen within the circus industry. And I struggled for a really long time around revealing my own abuses and those I've witnessed or heard about. And sexual harassment and abuse is really rife within the circus arts world at large, with little to no accountability for the perpetrators, who usually continue to thrive and be supported. But now we are at least at the start of trying to change that narrative with these discussions. And I'm just so grateful right now.
And I'm so grateful for your part in continuing that discussion. I think in general, it's very hard to speak publicly about a topic that's so painful. But my hope in joining you and other survivors in talking about this topic is that more people will feel like they can find support and don't have to keep that secret inside.
Yes. Well, Dancing is My Voice will be another step in sharing my experiences and how I've navigated and continue to navigate the very difficult path of survivorship. I love that Dancing is My Voice seeks to heal through body movement, as I've known many artists who have healed their own traumas through circus training, and I myself have used it as a lifeline for healing, and it has given me a sense of agency over my body and given me the strength to carry on to another day when I've been in really deep emotional pain.
That's right. And for me, one of the most important things about dancing is that I get to make the decision about how I use my body instead of somebody else making that decision for me. So it's such an empowering type of activity.
I wanted to say to start that your own personal story, Lisa, mirrors the advocacy of Rachel Denhollander, who was the first woman to publicly accuse Larry Nassar of sexual assault as a young gymnast. And she is also seeking to hold churches and congregations accountable for the prevalence of abuses within their communities as well. She suffered abuse in her own church when she was just 7 years old.
Wow.
Please, Lisa, can you share what inspired you to start Dancing is My Voice, and what is the goal of Dancing is My Voice?
Yes, well, I will start with the last part of that question. So the goal is really just to build a community of survivors and those who love survivors, which is basically all of us, if the statistics are correct about the 1 in 4 women being a survivor and 1 in 6 men. But yeah, having a safe community where people can connect with each other, enjoy an activity together, and form relationships that are supportive in the long term, whether those are discussing the trauma that happened or just sharing in good self-care type of activities. To answer your first question about why I started Dancing is My Voice, I got the idea after the last time that I was raped, which was about 7, probably 8 years ago now. And it was by somebody in my church. It was somebody that my husband at the time had introduced me to. And his first reaction was to go to the church and report it. This particular person was a worship leader in the church, and the church basically responded by asking, how did I cause this? My marriage didn't last because my husband just never was able to forgive me for letting myself get raped. And I was so alone. I had nobody to support me. And it was the worst experience of my life. The police process was terrible. I had to call my rapist on a recorded line with a police officer sitting right beside me, alone in a car. And there's so many things I could say about how terrible that experience was. But I decided while I was going through that pain was not going to be the last word. And that if I could do anything to help other people in this type of a situation, which I know there are many, then I was going to do what I could. So I looked at my life. I'm not a trained therapist. I'm not a psychologist, but I can dance and I can join people together in dance. So we started with that 4 years ago. And now we've turned into a 2-day global event with 12 countries participating. And I'm so excited to see people joining together to support each other.
Wow, that is so amazing. And I am so sorry that happened to you, Lisa, and your feelings of being so alone. I have felt so many similar feelings within my own experience, within reporting my abuse within the acrobatic gymnastics community, USA gymnastics community, the circus community. And I'm just very grateful that you transformed a lot of that pain and everything that you learned through that experience to start dancing as my voice and to help survivors like me pull through and to feel a sense of community and a sense of support. I wanted to ask you, Lisa, can you share who are the other experts and guests that will participate in the event over the course of 2 days? And what can those that are interested in attending expect from the wide range of educators and advocates?
Well, yes. And Shenea, also, I'm so sorry for everything that you've been through too. And I hope that by us talking about it, people will feel that they can find a voice that was taken away from them. I just wanted to mention that one positive thing that I'm seeing about the event is that there are survivors who have been participating in the dancing who I know this year are speaking for the first time because they've heard people share their stories.
Wow.
So I'm pretty excited about that. As far as the other people who will be presenting, there will be 5 tracks in the event. We're starting out with a little bit of Zumba in the morning for some pre-parties. And we'll have a welcome session, but kind of reflecting on past years, where we've been. And then you'll hear from a wide variety of people. For example, we will have a guest from Argentina. She is the producer of a film called Lo que no pude contar, which means what I could not tell. This particular film was expected to debut in the cinemas in Argentina this year, but because of COVID-19 and the cinema closures, they weren't able to launch the film in the cinema. So we'll be showing it as one of the tracks that will be in Spanish. And then Myra, who is the producer, will be available the next day to be able to answer questions. We also have Claude Leboeuf. He is a trained actor, singer. He does many different things, but I'm excited about his particular session because he is a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, which he totally blocked out. And that is very normal, by the way, for survivors not to remember what happened as children. So not too long ago, I think he said maybe about 7 years ago, he remembered a door. And he didn't really know too much about that door. He knows that he walked through it, but he couldn't remember what happened when he went inside the room. So he started using his creative talents to make skits about this door. Later, he was able to recover some of the memories that he had lost. And so he developed the skit further. He remembered going out of the door. Then he started to recover some of the memories of what had happened behind that closed door. And now he is able to heal because he knows what he's dealing with. And he's going to be able to give a session, basically letting people know in a mini session how they also can use creative storytelling with fragments of memories to be able to heal. We have one survivor series where many of the speakers are from RAIN Speakers Bureau, as you and I are both volunteers, Shenea.
Yes.
And I'm so excited about the wide variety of stories that the survivors will be telling. Some will be hosting live sessions so that they can take questions from people. Others prefer just to list a pre-recorded video. And there's a way for participants to ask questions in the session, even for pre-recorded videos. The content will be available for up to 6 months. So I'm pretty excited that even though we have a full schedule and people might feel like they can't choose, like which track do I go to? They can go back to those sessions later and view them. We also have one track that's 100% Zumba. And the reason for that is because we will be talking about some pretty heavy topics. And some people, well, maybe all of us, we can't talk about suicide and self-harm, for 2 days, which is a reality of our stories, right? So for anybody who's feeling a little overwhelmed, they can just jump out to a Zumba session, do some dancing and some self-care, and then come back later to view the rest of the sessions. One thing that will be common with all of the speakers is that we will all be talking on our theme, stepping out of the past and into the future. So while we do share common experiences, all of our stories are a little bit different. But everybody who is speaking has been able to find a way to enjoy life and have fun and have hope, even though we're dealing with some very difficult history, and we may able to still get help or need help from the side effects of sexual trauma. Addictions are very normal. Self-harm, feelings of suicide are very normal for survivors of sexual violence. And while maybe some of us are still dealing with some of those symptoms in a very painful and difficult way, we still have voices and we can still encourage people. And my particular personal belief is that survivors know the real deal. We can help somebody and help somebody move forward in their healing journey in a way that maybe sometimes even trained therapists can't do because they just don't get it. Their training is very important. And I'm not saying don't see a therapist. All of us probably need therapists for different reasons. Therapists are amazing and helpful, but they just don't have that personal experience and can't understand where we're coming from like another survivor can. And that's why this community is so important.
Oh, you're so amazing, Lisa. Thank you. That was so inspiring, so moving. There's so much in that so many people will be able to benefit from. I think no matter what spectrum you are on, in terms of survivorship or ally or still finding your way within coming to terms with your abuse, I think especially with the circus arts community and with artists, the stories that you shared about those artists that are sharing their experiences and how they've expressed them through art, I think are incredibly pertinent to our experience. It also made me think of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss. He has written several books, and he was a world champion in a certain discipline of dance, but I forget, it's escaping me at the moment. But he also, too, shares memories that he could not access for decades from being abused as a little boy. And he actually, I listened to his podcast the other week, and it was the first time he was ever sharing any of his experiences around childhood sexual abuse. And it was so powerful listening to him go through how he unlocked those memories. It was in a way that I almost had never heard of before. It was so deep and it was complex, and there was so much for him to unpack and unravel. And the story that you tell of one of the educators that will be participating in Dancing Is My Voice, like, wow, what a story.
Yeah, and this is what I'm realizing by being in a community of survivors is that we are some of the most creative people on the planet.
Yes.
I'm so convinced of that. I mean,
yes.
Look at you, all of the initiatives that you have started and that you're behind. But part of that could come from the fact that we were stuck in between a rock and a hard place. We had no good choices. So we had to be creative about how to survive, just how to get through a day. And that creativity follows us into other areas of our life. So I'm pretty excited about that and hearing from all of the speakers from the sessions this year.
Oh, that's just marvelous, and agreed. I wanted to ask you, Lisa, what do you think is the most important conversation around survivorship at the moment?
Do you mean in terms of publicly?
Yes, publicly. I would say maybe just in terms of narrative. What do you think is maybe an aspect to the conversation around survivorship that doesn't get enough attention or that is overlooked? What does it look like to you? Yeah, I would say like globally and at large. What does that narrative sound like to you? What does it look like to you? What do you think needs to change in and around the conversation around survivorship? And when I say survivorship, I know that means so many different things to so many people. It's a loaded term for me too. I think that, again, when we speak about victims, we speak about survivors, again, there's such a spectrum. And when we use the term like that, I know it's very broad. So I also too sometimes want to make sure that we're dialing into everybody's experiences. It's not just about people that have advocated or spoken out, but yeah, just in terms of what you think, how you see it in and around the world at large right now.
Yes. Well, one observation that I have, especially now coming after or maybe even during the Me Too movement, is that Me Too is so important because survivors get to say what happened to them, that they had this abuse to happen to them, right? But I don't want us to stop there. And that's what I think needs to happen to continue the conversation. Yes, something happened. Yes, justice is important. Yes, it's important to stop people to the extent that we can by going public with our stories, pressing charges. But honestly, my experience with the criminal justice system is that it doesn't really bring justice. It doesn't really keep dangerous people from doing more dangerous things. So given that, how can we as survivors encourage each other to go down this healing journey, however that looks for each of us, right? And to keep people from getting discouraged, because in a healing journey, it's not linear, right? It can feel like we take one step forward and 2 steps back, but that doesn't mean that we haven't made progress. And just because we haven't arrived at the point where we feel like we're 100% recovered and healed from our journey, that doesn't mean that today isn't better than yesterday or 2 days ago or 2 months ago or 2 years ago. So I would love to be able to see more conversation around people congratulating themselves and embracing the progress that they have made so that they don't feel like giving up. I know that I personally have in my life felt like nothing is ever going to change. I'm never getting past these addictions. No relationship is going to work for me because I have too many issues. And I realized that that was speaking death into my life because I didn't have hope. So we have to hold each other accountable for recognizing the good things that we're able to do to help build each other up and have tolerance and patience with each other. Yes, naming perpetrators is important, but I don't know if we're going to be able to win that fight with bringing justice. I do know that we can win the fight with our own lives for being successful, for loving the life that we have, regardless of what people have done to bring pain into it.
That's amazing. What is your day-to-day survivor toolkit, Lisa? What does that look like for you in terms of how you continue to thrive and support others in the way that you do? And how can others that have not had the experiences that we have be supportive within our day-to-day or our year-to-year or month-to-month? As what you've said so beautifully, everything that we go through is kind of blended into one. I tell people, I am having successful, happy moments and at the same time having to go through court cases or going through very traumatic experiences in therapy, but then having really beautiful experiences in my life. Like you said, it's not linear. Healing isn't linear. Everything is kind of coalesce into one thing, and things come from out of the blue that you have to deal with, and they come back into your life when you don't expect them, and it affects so many people in your life as well. It's not just you, and I think that you get a different sense of community as well when you are a survivor, which is a different version, I would say, of community that in terms of others supporting you, because I've had situations where, I've had people come to me where they're like, not only do you need to be involved in this, but it has to go to the people that are in and around supporting you. Are they willing, and are you willing to bring them back into this space? Are they okay with that? And there's a lot of decisions that you have to make in some difficult decisions in and around your journey, and in around seeking justice, and however that may be, even if it is sharing a story or wanting another voice within that story that spoke for you before, but maybe a couple of years down the line doesn't feel the same way. And so I again, there's so many different levels and aspects to the victim journey, through the survivorship journey, through the healing journey. And so how do you thrive, Lisa? What are some things that you do other than, you're just complete magic? But, I know that there's a space that you hold too, to be able to pull from more of a full cup, because it can also too be very exhausting and difficult to advocate and to hold others' pain and to hold their experiences, and others that really want to be there for you, but not really necessarily understanding how. And I've seen in my own experience too, sometimes it's, I have different people that can hold space for me in different ways. And I had to understand that. And that was hard, but in understanding that, that's also helped me to thrive better, of knowing where I can fill myself up for certain things that trigger me, or that are important to me, or that I need to process, or that I need to restore in some way or look at.
What you're saying, Shenea, is right on. I mean, it is kind of almost living on two paths at the same time. And things as simple as a smell we didn't realize was a trigger for us can surprise us. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we have to deal with that. So in terms of my toolkits, there's a number of things that I do. One is that I pray every day. I recently saw a news article. It was some research that was done that said if you start your day listening to the news and the bad things that are happening in the news, 100% of the time, we end up talking negative about our day because we started out listening to negative things. And I thought that was such an interesting study. So I start out focusing on really good, positive things, goals that I want to do for the day. I also have to be very careful about which voices I listen to, because I think that the more vocal we are as survivors, the more people step up to silence our voice. We shouldn't be surprised by that. Many people don't agree with what we do or what we say. And some people kind of get upset that we're even talking about it at all. So for me, I have decided that first, before I do anything or say anything, I have to be 100% sure that it's what I want to do and not what somebody is expecting me to do, because that's too much pressure. And I think the hardest thing for me, because I am a people pleaser, is to shut out those critics, right? The people who have nothing good to say and maybe will never be happy. So I have to have selective listening. Self-care for me is also really important. I have to be very careful about the foods that I eat, because I do tend to emotional eat. and then I feel bad, or emotional drink way too much, right? So I have to recognize when I'm falling into those patterns and be vulnerable enough to reach out for somebody to help me. In terms of dance, I do that every day. I talked a little bit earlier about how that gives me a way to make a decision about what I do about my body. But some other benefits of dancing in groups include the fact that when our movements are in unison, we feel united. There's some kind of strength in numbers that we feel by all doing the same thing. It's like everybody is on the same page, and there's no conflict when everybody's dancing the same. And you might have some experience of this, Shenea, when everything is coordinated, right? When the movements come together, and it just feels so complete. Also, yes. Another really nice thing about dance is that if you dance with the same people over and over again, you look forward to seeing them. They become friends. And before and after class, we talk about our days and what we're facing. And it becomes something that we look forward to. And I don't know if you've heard those stories about when you plan a vacation. The vacation itself actually isn't the best part of the vacation. Your happiness factor actually goes up when you know the dates of the vacation and you start planning it. And it's kind of like that with dancing in a group. When you have something to go forward to, your happiness factor goes up. And then also, it's good for your physical health just to dance. Like, there's nothing like breaking a good sweat, whether it's dance or yoga or something like that. But then I also read another really interesting study where the science supports the benefits of dance in healing from trauma. And what this particular study mentioned was that just moving to music. So for example, if you put your headsets on and you play music while you're jogging or running, and the movements are not coordinated to the music, that does not have the same benefit as when the movements actually match the energy and the mood of the lyrics. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that something that we kind of knew just by stumbling into it, maybe, by chance, if you want to call it that, there's actually science around the benefit of it.
Wow, that is remarkable. And I'm so excited that the culmination of Dancing Is My Voice will be at the Lincoln Memorial Center, right, in DC on Sunday, and you'll be actually in person, which was maybe not going to happen due to COVID, but you are now going to be able to socially distance and dance.
That's right. I was planning the online event because I wasn't really sure what we could expect. But as of this week, we have 200 people registered to attend in person, and generally more people just show up. We like people to register just so that we can make sure we have enough security. The National Park Service likes us to have a certain number of guards for every so many people. But yeah, people who are just at the Lincoln Memorial on that day, just jump in and have fun with us. It's a really fun event. Nice, wide, open space. It's so big that we all could be 20 feet apart and still fit and fit thousands of people.
Wow, that's going to be so powerful. And I wish that I was there, but I will be there in spirit and live, obviously, on Saturday when I participate and speak and do a Q&A as well. So I'm so looking forward to that. But the power of movement and the power of dance, whether it's the power of circus and the power of community and expressing coordinated movement, as you said to me, Lisa, is something that I just believe in so much. And, you know, the circus community, I wanted to ask you if you could shed some light on how you think as a circus community, we can continue normalizing the conversation around abuse and assault, because we are, again, such a connected physically, emotionally. I mean, you know, the circus community, we are so enraptured with one another. It's so enmeshed. And part of that is really healthy, but part of that is also what has created our shadow side, when people exploit the beauty of that for their own nefarious desires, also like you know, within gymnastics and within the acrobatics community and USA Gymnastics. And so these are environments where there is, like you're saying, the science supports why we feel so good when we're an acrobat, why we feel so good when we do circus, why we feel so good if we're a dancer, because we know that it breathes so much life and continuity within us and groundedness and expression. And like you're saying, on a molecular level, as they've been able to see with dance, and also too, they've been able to support the science behind meditation. That's really powerful for people to understand, even though people say, well, they've been saying that, you know, in the Vedas and things for thousands of years, but now, you know, it's important for people to see that. So people know how they feel. You know, they know how circus has transformed their lives. If there's somebody that came into circus maybe later in their lives, or they just understand the difference between how their life changed when they started participating in something that they loved and they found, again, agency over their bodies. But it's a very kind of conflicting thing now that we are speaking about in this environment of how that's also been abused for others' benefit. And so how do you think we can continue to normalize the conversation within our circus community and also to our USA Gymnastics communities?
Yes, those are really good questions, Shenea. And I think the answer to that comes down to, how do you create an environment of trust? And the reason I say that is because whenever you do any type of activity with a group of people without trust, that activity is not going to be quite as good as if everybody trusts, as it would if everybody trusts each other. I mean, it could be anything, right? Think of a bake sale, right? If you don't trust the person charging for the chocolate chip cookies, all of a sudden there's conflict. So how much more when you're trying to do something like what circus does, right? And the unfortunate thing about people who take advantage and introduce abuses into that type of community is that, one, they're hurting the person that they're, I wouldn't say targeting, right? The victim or whoever's the target of their abuse, but they're hurting the greater community. So what could happen in the circus community is, if everybody is on board, that trust has to be a part of the community, or these events will not be as good as they could be. And if everybody is on board with the trust and with, you know, making this the best event as possible, I wonder what actions would be different for making sure that those abuses are brought to the surface and weeded out, those people weeded out of the community sooner. I think a lot of times the reason that people don't talk about abuse is because sometimes they feel that they're to blame for what happened, that somehow they didn't stop it. And that is the biggest lie. That's the biggest lie. Because we are never responsible for somebody trying to hurt us. So I think that as you and other people start to talk more about this, that shame that's associated with saying this horrible thing happened to me will start to free up voices, and people can start to talk about this sooner so that the problem can be addressed. And once that happens, then once you're on the other side of, getting the community safe or the relationship safe, then we have this very huge challenge in front of us of how do we establish trust again? How do we become vulnerable in a community where we've been hurt, where we've trusted, and we've been burned? So I don't know. I mean, I wish I had a nice, neat answer for you. But as we both know, every person is going to, I guess, process what's happened a little bit differently, heal a little bit differently. And then all of those individual activities affect the people around us. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And I would love just to see the conversation increase as a next step, because I believe that the answer to that comes from within the community itself.
That's so powerful, Lisa. Thank you so much for your wisdom, from your incredible amount of experience, for supporting others in finding their voice through dance, through movement, through advocating, through sharing your own personal stories, and being willing to continuing to expose yourself in an environment, yes, that still in many ways does not want us to use our voices, but sees how difficult it is to silence us when we have found our voice. We have found our voices.
And if I could say one other thing, after I went through 6 months of trauma recovery healing, like I was an inpatient, I was in partial hospitalization. It was a very long process before I could even hold a job again and trust that I could go to work and feel safe. But I did end up volunteering on the National Sexual Assault Hotline. And I remember when I was thinking about that decision, should I volunteer on the hotline or not? And a couple of people close to me said, you know what? Your own trauma is so great. There's no way you're going to be able to handle talking to other people who are in these very difficult situations. But for some reason, I gave it a try. And the training that I received was so healing, because it normalized a lot of what I was feeling, right? That I felt like I couldn't move when it was happening to me. Like, why didn't I fight back? And hearing the survivors on the other side of the chats normalized a lot of my own feelings. And for me, it was very difficult to articulate some of my feelings and even difficult to articulate some of my experiences. And as I was there working on the hotline, reading these chats and responding to them, these survivors put words into feelings and experiences that I had had, but I had never been able to articulate. So I worked over 1,000 hours on the National Sexual Assault Hotline. I recommend that for every survivor. It's the most amazing experience. And I can't even tell you how much just being able to have that privilege of being in those rape crisis calls helped me in my own healing journey.
I can imagine. And I've had a very similar experience, Lisa, with sharing my story in ways that those that have not been victimized do not understand. And I have told them many times how it does relieve you and heals you. And I think unless you've experienced it, sometimes it's very difficult for those on the outside of that to understand that. And I agree. Thank you so much for sharing that as well, because that is such an important component of your story and of your advocacy. And thank you for sharing how that's also been coupled with your journey to healing. And in the articulation of experience, that's also, I think I told you that before. And I love what you told me when we first started speaking. You reminded me of something so powerful that you said. I think I might paraphrase this a little bit terribly, so please repeat it for me in the way that you said it. But it's in speaking your story 20 times is conducive to healing it.
Right. That's what I learned when I was in this trauma recovery program for 6 months. Was they said that on average, we as survivors have to be able to speak our story on average 20 times before we can begin to heal. So anybody who has ever tried to put words to an experience so painful that there are no words to even describe what it was like, what it felt like, what these people who abused us did to us, right? We had to talk about it. And the first time, at least for me, I couldn't even get the words out. I was crying and sobbing, and I didn't even know all of the details of what had happened, but it was so, so emotional, and it felt so overwhelming. And the second time, I was still crying. The fifth time, I was probably still crying. Maybe it was the 10th time that I was able to actually say part of my story without breaking into tears. And it's not that we become conditioned to it or desensitized to it, and it's any less bad after we begin to talk about it. But it's just that there's something that changes on the inside of us by letting that voice come out. And this is where my heart just aches from talking to the survivors on the hotline, because I talked to so many hundreds of people who never told anyone. They were just keeping that story inside of them, sometimes their whole lifetimes. And it takes so much energy to hold that in. And we try to do all of these other things to cover that up and cope with it. Some of those other things may not be so productive or so good for our health. And then because of the way we try to cope with it, then we feel more shame and we feel more bad because everybody's like, oh, you shouldn't drink until you black out, right? Oh, you shouldn't cut. There's a lot of judgment about people who cut, right? For me, those people, like people who cut, they have found a solution. They are alive. And if that's how they cope with it today, then good. But let's all build up our toolkits, like you said, right? So that we have other tools. So we don't always go back to these same tools. And over time, we learn new ways of coping that we feel good about the way we're coping with it and not feel bad about, oh, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yes, exactly. And for me, I love that you speak about that, Lisa, in terms of like how you use your words and how you say things, because I'm in a lot of spaces sometimes where, again, this conversation isn't normalized and they look at me and they're like, wow, like you say rape and molestation, those things, like they're not 4-letter words. And I remind people, when you can get to the point where you're saying words like rape, assault, molestation, like they are not 4-letter words coming out of your mouth, you know that you've come to a different level of healing for yourself. Right. Because that to me was definitely a game changer in terms of how people saw me, in terms of how I spoke and the words that I used and how I felt while using them. And it changed so much for me. And it's been years, obviously, in the making. But I've witnessed the feedback, the reflection that I get from other survivors and others that are allies. And I tell them many times, you know, when those words can come out of your mouth, like you're talking about just any other normal topic that you would be talking about, the power over your own story and the autonomy, the agency that you feel over your experience. And it's such a different feeling. And I love that you said too about it's not that we're numb to this, it's that we've processed it and moved through it, and that we've come home. You know, there's a level of acceptance there. There's a level of process there.
Shenea, I don't know if you remember the first time that you said the word rape, but even for me, it took me a long time to recognize it as rape. And so by the time I was actually able to say that word, it seemed a little scary. Like I shouldn't be saying bad things about somebody. And yes. I was worried about that person.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't know if you can remember back to that first time, but yeah, so much healing in just saying that word.
Yes, there was. And I had the exact same experience as you, Lisa. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but yes, it really did feel like, oh my gosh, I cannot say this word. I'm hurting them by saying this word, by giving the thing the name. I'm hurting them, or I'm hurting others by using the word rape. It's just so crazy, the brainwashing and the shame and the societal pressures and constructs that we have in and around these words, and the things that are used actually as tools to be able to describe what has happened to us. We end up they're weaponized against us, which I find fascinating. But it definitely did. I mean, it was one of the things that as soon as I could, I haven't stopped. I have not stopped since, making sure that I use words to describe my experience as soon as I discovered and found the space to be able to use them and to release them and to repeat them over and over and over again, which was, again, such a deep and dark and difficult journey.
Right.
Wow. This has been just so incredible, Lisa. You are so amazing. And I'm so grateful for you and who you are in the world, who you decide to be every single day in this world. You continue to push on, you continue to get up, you continue to do the work, and you also continue to try and spread even more nuances in and around our conversations, because like you said, no one's journey is the same. Every single survivor's journey is unique, and everybody's healing and growth is specific and unique, and normalizing that too. Like my journey is not the same as yours. Your journey isn't the same as another survivor that we know of, and that's okay, and that there are sometimes parallels. There are sometimes where our stories intersect and they meet, but that inviting all those different nuances allows others to come to the understanding of what has potentially been perpetrated against them. Because if you never have anyone that maybe is saying something slightly different or outside of the narrative, you maybe won't be able to fill in the different pieces to the puzzle of your own story of abuse and get the help that you need, the resources and the healing. So That's
exactly right. Yeah. And I mean, even though our stories aren't the same, Shenea, I have been inspired by you so much, and I have learned so much from you. So even though the details are, different, maybe very different, there's a lot of similarities in what a healing journey can look like, where I can learn from you and I can be inspired by what you say, and I can relate to what you're saying, and I feel the pain of what you're saying, but I also celebrate what you're doing, because it's hard. Like, what you're doing is hard. And I think somebody who hasn't been through this can't possibly imagine how hard it is what you're doing. So I celebrate that with you. And I just thank you so much for all you do to express your voice, but also, give voices to other people.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so honored to have you on the show. I'm so honored to participate in Dancing is My Voice. I'm so honored for the event this upcoming weekend on Saturday and Sunday, which is October 11th and October 10th. And the event is available through the HOVA app, which, again, you said is external and will be available 6 months post the event. So if you aren't able to attend live, please know that you can re-engage with the entire event after it has happened. And I look forward to the progression and the evolution of everything that you do through Dancing is My Voice, Lisa. And I'm so, so, so grateful for all that you do. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Shenea. I'm so glad we found each other. And yes, I look forward to hearing more great stuff from you. Look forward to hearing you this weekend at the event. And thank you just so much for your participation in everything you do.
I wanted to end this episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast with a quote by Dr. Edith Eger, who was a teenager in 1944 when she and her family were sent to Auschwitz in the Second World War. Despite the overwhelming odds, Dr. Edith survived the Holocaust and eventually, in her life, became a trauma specialist and survivor. Dr. Edith's story is so remarkable and inspiring in the way that before she was taken off to Auschwitz, she was at one point training in gymnastics on the path to the Olympics, and then eventually had continued to pursue her passion for dance. She has an indomitable spirit, and I actually last summer was performing and working very near to Auschwitz, and it was a very powerful and palpable experience. I wasn't able, due to my work schedule, to go into Auschwitz, but I was able to go around Auschwitz as I was literally performing about 5 minutes down the road, which I didn't know about until I had arrived in Poland, even though this was not my first time in Poland. Dr. Edith has these powerful words to say from her book, The Choice. And I thought, in reflection of this very inspiring conversation that I had with Dancing is My Voice founder, Lisa Aneiva, that it would be the most perfect words of wisdom for those seeking to heal themselves from abuses and traumas of all kinds in their lives. Dr. Edith says, I would love to help you discover the concentration camp of your own mind and discover the person that you were meant to be. I would love to help you experience freedom from the past, freedom from failures and fears, freedom from anger and mistakes, freedom from regret and unresolved grief, and the freedom to enjoy the full, rich feast of life. We cannot choose to have a life free of hurt, but we can choose to be free, to escape the past, no matter what befalls us, and to embrace the possible, I invite you to make the choice to be free. Dr. Edith Eger has a new book out now titled The Gift, 12 Lessons to Save Your Life. May it bring you peace and inspiration. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast, where I interviewed founder of Dancing Is My Voice, Lisa Aneiva. The Live Like an Acrobat podcast is also available on Circus Talk, the inclusive, independent, and international online network for the circus industry. Circus Talk's mission is to create a level playing field for this industry and democratize access to information. Please consider subscribing to the Live Like an Acrobat podcast and to the CircuspreneurBlog.com, where you will find extended conversations and interactive content of each episode of the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. I'm your host, Shenea Stiletto, and until next time, please stay safe and stay healthy.